Right, everyone, I think it's a good time to resume and have our speaker. Just get the attention of those on Zoom, okay. All right.
With you.
Those of you on Zoom, of course, don't get biscuits like we have here, so no.
Some of us don't need biscuits.
Garibaldi.
Oh, they're my favourite.
Some of us have chocolates.
Right, I know. Right, everyone. So, as usual with our AGM, we have a guest speaker, and this year it's Jocelyn Hayes, as the flyer will say on the bookstall, because Kate Hignett is otherwise busy, otherwise engaged, on her story about influential women. And I'm hoping Mary Wood's in there somewhere, my personal favourite, the widow who ran the business on her own for 16 years in the 1860s. So with no further ado, I'll hand you over to Jocelyn. Are you happy to take some questions at the end?
Yes,
questions? Okay. Yes. I know, but on the website and on the new flyer.
I've stepped in and
yes,
I've renewed the flyer. That's just there so you can see my name.
Okay.
But yes,
so I shall
couldn't come with you, come to be here tonight.
Right, so I'll hand you over to Jocelyn. Okay.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you, and I really welcome the opportunity of being able to speak about HerStory York. In particular, I'm going to be looking at a little bit about our organisation and how it all started and developed. You might have questions such as, what is it and why have you done this project? What's it about? How have you done it? So I'll be looking at those particular aspects. And secondly, pulling through quite a few examples. We have looked, as it says here, at 100 women. We won't be doing 100 women tonight, you'll be pleased to hear. But we will be just touching on a few of them to give you a bit of a taste as to the sorts of areas we've been looking at. Some of them may actually be quite familiar to you, I believe, but more of that later. Yes, when I was thinking about this talk, I thought, history, York, women, those are the key things that we're touching on tonight. And in particular, our focus has been on history. And to that end, I think, well, it's perhaps important to think about, and certainly that's where we've come from, thinking about how is history recorded? And it's very much history is important, and in particular, how people's impact and activities have been recorded. Okay.
I suppose try the space bar.
Yeah, we'll go old-fashioned, I think.
Oh. They have been. Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry. It's not playing.
Isn't it? Yeah. Let's try that. No.
Okay, we'll go.
Yeah, let's do that one. Yeah.
Okay. Right, so a starting point for us, and in particular Kate Hignett, who was the founding member of HerStory York, was to go to York Explore Library and to have an examination of quite a few books. And these are some of the books she actually looked at, to look at how are women represented in books. And as you can see, these are a few examples here. And her researchers have certainly shown that there's quite a big disparity, I think you'll agree, in terms of the recording of women being mentioned in comparison with men. So you may be thinking, why? We certainly did. And what could be the reasons for this? How can it perhaps be put right or adjusted? This is certainly a very strong starting point for our group, really. And we perhaps need to question, yes, why are women not represented? Oh, it's working now. Why are women not represented in history? They are, after all, 50 likes women in York's history shouldn't be a mystery. She's very keen on quite a few of the sort of quotes. But yes, I mean, why aren't women there? Why haven't their efforts been recorded? I mean, originally I studied art history, and more recently I was sort of thinking, female artists, you know, can I think of several female artists and who are they? And then when you try to sort of pull them through, you can think of many more male artists than perhaps female artists. And, you know, and certainly many other areas, walks of life, professions, and so forth. So not surprisingly, we felt that this situation needs to be both highlighted and adjusted, if possible. What reasons we explored, firstly, might have led to this situation. What sort of reasons do we think? Well, I'm sure you are probably mentally going through some of your thoughts about this. These are some of the ones which we've put together, which we think are likely. Perhaps these underpin the underrepresentation of women in history books. So, for example, lack of status and money. Certainly without this, women have been unable to take an active and persuasive role in the decision making in society. Childcare, whilst we know that some more affluent, rich, middle class Victorian women, for example, might have been able to buy in childcare and free them up to undertake writing, for example, those sort of opportunities haven't been open to all women. Barriers in society certainly have prevented women from being able to practice or pursue professional careers often, you know, being actually barred from particular professions as well. Educational opportunity, that one, it's still kicking around now, isn't it? And education is something that's quite dear to HerStory, your members, really, and we'll come back to that in a bit, but you know, certainly educational opportunity, the lack of it can really damage opportunities for our younger people coming through and so forth. Unconscious assumptions and expectations, bias and all of those aspects. Sometimes men taking the credit for what women might have done. I've personally experienced that. And indeed, many of these aspects we brainstormed and pulled through quite a few of these and touched on quite a few personal aspects too, really. And the last one I've put here, women were often seen as having a lack of possessions themselves and often being regarded as possession of the man and indeed their own sort of money as well. So these viewpoints have quite often led to gender stereotypes and led to bias, expectations and assumptions. So you might say, why does this matter now? Certainly, education, or rather re-education, might help prevent gender assumptions and would be important to break in order to affect any change. There are implications for future generations of girls and predominant attitudes that could be addressed, along with a supportive role that schools can play. So education is key, certainly something we very much focused on, looking to see what we can do to change those thoughts and assumptions. But also an important aspect is communication. Without communicating those ideas in inventive, attention-grabbing ways, you know, your messages aren't going to get across. Hopefully we can foster greater recognition and awareness of women's achievements. And ultimately help to address the disproportionate opportunities open to young women and lead to an overall greater appreciation of women's role in society. Well, that was the hope. Obviously, we are quite an ambitious group. We've had very high aspirations as to what we might be able to achieve and do. A starting point, certainly I feel, and the group feels, lies in educating future generations, whether it's through schools or universities. And we've been very successful actually with college students, university students, very much embracing some of the ideas and issues that we've discussed with them. And to ensure that young women of the future are in fact valued for their contribution to society, which could be reflected more fully in our history books too. So, okay, that's the past. You might say, how did the group itself start? Well, originally there was a social media advert which invited women to come along. It was very much a case of find out more about a potential research project. There was a University of York researcher involved. I think Kate was there. There were about 4 people who were already interested. And in the end, there were about 15, 16 of us at York St John's at a meeting room. And we all stared at each other. Where do we take this? What do we do with this? We had no funding, no defined mission, but loads of energy and passion. And as I've said, we shared many stories and reasons why we wanted to be involved. Our group members ranged from lawyers, teachers, social workers, shop workers, academics, heritage consultants, a lecturer, several retired people, and a few students as well. So after much early discussion, these are the sorts of areas that we decided to focus on. So the research project, and if you like, it is important, isn't it, often with a project to try and shape up some sort of criteria. What is it we're actually going to be doing and looking at? So because it was a millennium and we were hoping to perhaps apply for some funding, lottery funding, we thought, okay, identify 100 women. The period we're looking at, I'm sorry, we're not including your lady, because we're looking at between 1918 to 2018. That's fine. We're looking at women who perhaps affected some sort of change in York. They might have challenged the status quo in some sort of way. The change maker title that we gave to the exhibition that we put together was very much sort of tapping into that. They were women who were seeking to make changes. They might have done things differently. They might have been innovative. Not always rich middle class women, I hasten to add, because we're also very conscious of looking for balance with the people that we're pulling through and looking at and identifying. It needs to be a story, a woman's story that hasn't really, I'm not very keen on negative words, so the word invisible I find quite difficult. I know Kate likes it, but certainly looking at stories that haven't really been told, perhaps the women involved haven't been valued as much as perhaps they could have been. And if anything, what I'm hoping and what we have hoped is the past is the past. What we're going to be doing is a positive thing. It's going to be a celebration of women, their achievements, their activities, and hopefully in the future we may be able to influence things so that things are written down differently or certainly thought about and considered. We would do this through research, which involved secondary and primary research approaches, so interviews and lots of research, so documents. Obviously, most of the women, I guess, on the whole, were not living. Some were, though, so we had a mixture as well. And each of the members brought a multitude of different skills. Yes, we had some people who had actually done quite a bit of research, but we had many people who brought a range of skills, whether it was working on exhibitions. We had a lot of women who were interested inevitably on writing. And the main early quest was really to start writing about 100 women. It was quite a big task. The first task was identify which ones we should include. That did involve quite a bit of argument and discussion, and it changed mightily quite a few times. There is no ideal amount of 100 women. I think we've tried to get a balance really within the different sort of key areas that we've been looking at. Some people were interested more in heritage and conservation. My background's in teaching entrepreneurship, so I was quite keen to look at women now who are very entrepreneurial, if you like, and perhaps aren't being recognised sufficiently. Others are very much more historians, and basically we've all brought to this a host of personal and individual experiences as well. And perhaps of feeling invisible at times or slightly excluded. Anyhow, many meetings later, we discussed how to shape up the 100 women, and we felt that a range of themes initially would be really useful. And to get a spread, I think we had 2 lawyers that have sort of stayed within that. But, if there's 100 women, you need to have a balance of people working, say, in health sector, social sector, the arts. It might be in sport, education, conservation, a whole host of different areas, really. So we've got those, and as you can see, there's quite a long list of them. And originally we were going to put and hope to do an exhibition and a book that would reflect all of these different areas. But as you will see, we thought about things differently in the end. But the original drive was to certainly pull through women that represented quite a few of these areas. And yes, we did get some from sports, and we have got a football over at the exhibition with Amy's football there signed. So we wanted to ensure there was good spread and representation of women, and also to understand a bit more perhaps exactly why so few women are actually in history books, and along the way, what could we learn from the experience of women in the past. So all this and several meetings later has led to a whole range of activities, and I've included a few here that we've been very much involved in. Communication, as I said earlier, has been key in all our activities. Therefore, these are some of our early developments and successes. We had an early launch at York Explore, where Rachel Maskell came along and gave a really supportive speech and endorsement to our work. We've done exhibitions, we've done talks and conferences, setting up a website. And remember, we really were doing this on quite a tight budget, as well as ongoing work in writing up the women's stories, which actually took a couple of years to really sort of start shaping them up. We have had and still have many ambitions, and this has included undertaking the large exhibition at York Castle Museum, which I worked on with 6 other members to realise as chair. And it was expected, thankfully, well, it was made possible with the Castle Museum, their partnership, to do it to a professional standard, and they supported us very much. Philip Newton, who's a community worker there, has been tremendous in supporting our work and helping us to shape it up, really. We successfully gained a lottery funding, a grant towards this, and as I said, lots of supportive staff. Other aspects are still in development, though. It doesn't stop there. We've got, for example, ongoing realisation of a book, a publication, which is happening right now. We've got development of educational resources. That's something many members of our group really feel strongly about, that educational resources with schools or involving university students is key. So we've made links and with history teachers in York, and they're very keen and have helped develop sort of partnership working. And currently a film is being developed. We also got an app, which is an audio walking tour around York, sort of pinpointing where such women that we've touched upon have lived or worked. So students' involvement has taken us a bit by surprise. We've had films, we've had theatre production that the students researched different women as part of their coursework and then presented very successfully some plays as well. And they were very well researched, and there's ongoing interest to do yet more projects. One student actually got in touch only the other week, last week, and asked, what can I do? How can I get involved? So I suggested that she look to the university and perhaps develop something there in terms of looking at how academic women are perhaps represented within each department, which really floated her boat. And she got very excited about it. There's so much energy there and a will to sort of get things moving, which is really great. And it can go on and on. And Kate is very much, as I say, the founder, and she always has lots of ideas of more, more, more. So we have to sometimes hold her back, because more can be less. And certainly the most recent initiative, which has been the exhibition, which I'm going to just explore a bit more now, has really, well, I think it's one of the best things we've done lately. I think the publication will probably be very strong too, but it's very much helped to sort of focus our minds. We've all developed skills, the members themselves, whether it's writing or how to present things and to develop it. Originally, I thought we were having one room. Philip Newton contacted us and said, oh yes, the York Castle Museum will support you and provide space. And I thought space would mean one room, perhaps a quarter the size of here. Oh no, we arrived, long corridor and 4 rooms of it, which I took a step back. There's mixed feelings. This is an opportunity, but on quite a big scale, really. So the whole thing has taken a good 6 months or more for the group of 7 in terms of the exhibition. But I feel it's sort of pulled through and built on quite a lot of the work that we've been doing, our researchers, and helped consolidate things for us before launching into the full publication of 100 women. So Change Makers is what it's about. I'll now have a look in the second part, if you like, so we can focus a bit more on some examples of some of these women perhaps you may or might not heard of. We, in the end, rather than planning the exhibition to be in sort of areas of medicine and so forth, we decided to actually put it within key periods in which the women were active and alive. So, for example, we looked at the early 20th century, the mid 20th century and after, sort of 1946 to 80s, and the late 20th century and early 21st century, which fitted into 3 key rooms to start with. So quite wide at times, but I think it sort of has provided quite a good bit of variety and a bit of focus in that very much throughout as chair of this exhibition development, I felt it wasn't sufficient just to tell women's stories. We had to put it into a context, a historical context, so that, as I called it, we would have an intelligent backdrop to where, you know, what the women were doing and why, you know, and how was what they were doing special. You have to, you know, a bit like art history, you know, why is a certain artist worth paying attention to? Is it because he's changed what others, you know, is built on from what's gone before? So knowing the context and focusing on that has been, to my mind, pretty important. Anyway, we've got Maud here. The early 20th century, let me just start by giving you a little bit of context. World War I, 1914 to 18, impacted all areas of British society at the time, including women. And as you might imagine, it was a time of great loss, with so many men killed and many women never marrying. But it was also a time of opportunity. For example, in 1918, many women over 30 finally got the vote. And following campaigning by suffragettes, things started to change slowly. Universities were increasingly opening their courses to women, enabling wealthy women to have the same education as men. During the war, and this happened in the Second World War too, many women had taken on men's jobs. They were, however, expected to stand back and give men their jobs back once the war was over. So but despite these challenges, many remarkable women still helped to change the world. So Maud, let's find out a little bit about Maud. So there's some basic sort of information here about some of it's quite something to try and reduce a person's life to just a few sentences. But certainly she was an important first female member of the Company of Merchant Adventurers and an honorary member from 1913, and then an honorary curator of the hall in 1918. She was, as curator, I believe, of the Merchant Adventurers Hall, she had so much energy and focus and was instrumental in restoring the building. And as archivist and historian of YMA Company, she collated its account rolls and minute books and translated, transcribed and published many books and also quantities of medieval archives. So someone there with determination, energy, and achieved a great deal. I have to mention at this point, sorry, just go back, a bit of an added one, which I think Ian said, well, we'll mention Delma. And in fact, Delma Tomlin, I think, complements here to a large extent, because Delma Tomlin, which I guess many of you will have heard of, has been elected to be the first female governor in over 660 years at Merchant Adventurers, which is really quite a, well, I think it's a deserved accomplishment. Certainly I've known of Delma ever since I moved to York in '79, and since the year 2000 she's been the director of the acclaimed National Centre, early NCEM, which is housed in the medieval Church of St Margaret. Originally, she led the project which transformed the neglected church. I don't know if any of you have been there. It's a wonderful place. And producing a year-round programme of music and events and prestigious festivals, including York Early Music Festival. And the Company of Merchant Adventurers I've got here of the City of York has a long and prestigious history in promoting enterprise and commercial venturing. So I think she certainly is all business risk-taking. So certainly I think Delma's appointment is well deserved. And yes, good luck with all of that. So that's enough about the Merchant Adventures. Moving on, Mary Hughes, and she was sorry, I lost my place. Mary Hughes, yes, co-founder of York Refugee Committee, certainly a Quaker, and has worked tirelessly in co-founding and setting up York Refugee Committee, and has worked with volunteers offering financial support, and has found homes for Jews and political refugees. This rather struck a chord with me, you know, seeing as what's happening at the moment with Ukraine, really. And when I sort of read about things that how tirelessly she worked to raise funds and in contacting Jews to ensure that, well, she said, "It's too much for me, I know, but I'd rather die doing too much than too little. If you get behind a day with this refugee work, then it's hopeless catching up. It goes to enormous dimensions with each post and telephone call." Certainly, she was very successful in bringing refugees to York and supporting that itself. And of course, similar work is ongoing at the moment with the UK. Now, the next lady I'm going to touch on is Dolly Cooper. And Dolly, as you can see, 1921 to 2012. She was born 21st May 21. She had 6 siblings, and I mean, very much of its time. Parents died of tuberculosis when she was just 17 years old. We talked earlier about opportunities. Yes, she perhaps could have gone into a different way. She was a bright girl, but she simply couldn't afford the £2 entry fee to sit the civil service exams. So instead she joined Joseph Rowntree and worked in the wages department. She also enlisted in the RAF, but eventually she worked as a teacher for 20 years at Carr Junior School. I guess the thing you're saying, well, what else did she do? Well, Dolly was well, she renewed it in 1946. I've got here an acquaintance with Ken Cooper, who I'm sure many of you will have been in contact with in the past. And she married him in 47. Certainly, she was a member of and very active in many York-based organisations, including York Trade Union Council, the Scouts, HerStory, and the Jane Wright Charity. She was described as highly intelligent, sharp, funny, articulate, and opinionated. But above all, her interest was in young people and their education and welfare. Kathleen Crane, yes, I mean, we've touched on, she was very much, I don't know if I mentioned it, she served as very much involved in re-establishing the Labour Party and active in party life for over 40 years. So we've looked at someone involved in the political arena, but now we're moving on to someone who has been involved in the health sector, Kathleen Crane. Kathleen Crane, she originally trained medicine, and she, by 1946, she worked very much in preventative medicine and campaigning about the link between lung cancer, for example, and cigarette smoking. She created York Mental Health Service and was responsible also for setting up cervical screening service as well in the 1950s. We tend to think sometimes that these things have only, well, you know, it takes a lot of time and effort, imagination, determination to make these changes. They don't just happen at all, really. And Kathleen, yeah, so being able to work with other people, certainly bringing the local authority together and hospital medical personnel has been something that, you know, she's achieved and succeeded in. Now, this lady, this was someone who I actually researched, Elizabeth Hartley, Keeper of Archaeology, the first ever Keeper of Archaeology. This was one that I researched and wrote about, actually. My interests are in conservation. I've studied conservation of buildings. So I was very pleased to follow this up. And indeed, she has some amazing achievements, which, for example, one of the key things that might stand out is the fact that she masterminded special topics, temporary exhibition. She had great contacts, I believe, with the best museum designers of the day, contacts in London, support from the British Museum. And in doing so, she managed to bring some notable exhibitions, which included things such as in 1976, the Viking Kingdom of York, 1980, the International Vikings Exhibition. Some of you might have visited that. 1982, Vikings in England Exhibition, which was opened by Her Royal Highness, Prince of Wales. And 2001, Alcuin and Shalman, Maine, the Golden Age of York. And 2006, Constantine the Great. She also managed to source some wonderful objects for the Yorkshire Museum, including the iconic, and you may well have heard of it, I'm sure, the Midland Jewel. And she was elected in 1995 as Fellow of the Society of Antiquities. Dr. Peter Adiman described her as this most determined, imaginative and devoted American expat whose legacy to her adopted city will extend far into the future. So certainly the period, if you like, we had a quandary, but we had to sort of focus on when people were most active, you know, which room to put them in. And certainly one of the areas that interested me the most was looking at mid-century and after. It was a time of change, as you might imagine, for women who once again, when the war had started, they took up roles that men had done, and working as porters, for example, at the railway station, to munitions factories, their hair turning yellow on their hands because of contamination from dealing with the gadgets, no, not gadgets, the incendiary devices and so forth. So they were willing to do all those things. And then at the end, it's like, okay, time to go back home. It was a huge change and upheaval for many women to suddenly find themselves going back into the home. But for them, I think it was never going to quite be the same again, really. And indeed, we've seen a lot of changes through the 70s, a lot of sort of laws. We've had things like the Peel, the 60s, the 70s, unhappy labour relations and during that period. Many women during that stage very much started embracing the challenge of taking up new work in roles, new work roles and in society, in what had been considered as male roles. Women developed a whole range of new initiatives in conservation and the environment, education, health, medicine, as well as in the arts. So Elizabeth Hartley, yes, one certainly to remember, which I'd like to add an extra, just one little extra, which I haven't got a picture of, but that I would very much like to sort of touch on. And I contacted York St John's University, not York St John's, University of York Conservation Department, and asked them to suggest perhaps someone in conservation who they felt should be included. And we did that quite a lot, trying to get people's ideas of who should be included. And Jill Chitty, who I knew, suggested June Hargreaves. And I was so delighted. I read about June, and you know, she certainly has transformed in the mid-60s laws about conservation areas. And I've got a quote here: June Hargreaves was the single most influential voice in England calling for the creation of conservation areas. This was when women were not regarded as equal in the workplace, but she personally convinced senior civil servants and government ministers to change the law. So, you know, I hope you can read up a bit more about June Hargreaves. To my mind, she's a bit of a role model. You know, it's nice to find women that you think, you know, she persevered, she made change, she continued until she managed to bring about change. On a few. If you want to find out more, please go and visit the exhibition that's been done in partnership with York Castle Museum, and find out more about more women, because they're there and they are part of the life in York, part of our fabric and where we are today. And I hope that overall, I've been able to reveal a bit more about women's role and the impact they've had upon the city of York. We greatly feel at HerStory York that these women's stories need to be told to ensure that they have a place in history. And I hope that you agree after this talk that is the case. So, oh, sorry, I should have put that on. So, there's no more for me to say, but thank you. This is part of, we've got some plaques there on the wall. Kate Hyatt was instrumental in developing all of these with the names of 100 women. On the right-hand side, you can see how many women have been involved in this project. It's from 2019. Some people have stayed with it all the way through, and others have sort of dipped into aspects that interest them. If any of you are interested in being a part of it for future exploits, then do contact me and have a word with me afterwards. But thank you for listening. I hope you'll go and visit and find out more. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jocelyn.